All right, we are recording. Hi, Matt. It is really an extraordinary gift and pleasure to be talking with you today. I'm just going to introduce myself very quickly. I haven't made a recording or done an interview for over 2 years. I'm Christine Anderson from Earth Impasse, and my motivation really for reaching out to Matt was that my own experiences, my own deeper quest, my own desire to really find out who I am in this whole universe of things has led me through many different investigations. Most recently, over the past few years, I started looking at the electrical nature of the universe. I started looking at plasma physics, and really hitting very deep onto that for me, that truth had to be a universal truth. That truth wasn't something outside. It was something to be experienced from the inner knowing. And during that time, of course, I came across the work of Walter Russell. In all the probably hundreds of conversations I've had, very few people have ever heard his name. And that surprised me. And of course, looking into Walter Russell led me to Matt. Also, Matt's own writings. I think you speak with a beautiful eloquence, Matt. So let me just give a little bio on you right now from your bio so people know who you are. You say you are a meta scientist, you're a musician, philosopher, poet, practitioner of universal law, the natural science, and a living philosophy. You're also an audio and video producer, and you're currently serving as the president of the University of Science and Philosophy, which was formerly the Walter Russell Foundation, since January 1st, 2016. And I find that very interesting, and maybe you want to jump in and let people know how you came to find Walter Russell, how you took on this huge task of taking his work out of storage and getting it back to public view.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Story of fate, really, you could call it. And I guess you could say I first heard of Walter Russell in a forum through Radio Orbit. A friend of mine, Mike Hagan, who does the Radio Orbit podcast on a local station in Columbia, Missouri, every Monday night, 11 to 2 a.m. He had a forum, and I'd heard of Walter Russell mentioned in that forum, and it really didn't occur to me to go and look at, the man's work at that time. It just sort of one of those things that slide by you. But I would actually discover a used book by Walter Russell called The Secret of Light in a bookstore in 2007. And lo and behold, down by my foot is this blue book. And I was actually collecting Masonic books and military manuals, anything I could find that were sort of, not something that's normally in print. And there's this book, The Secret of Light, so that eventually I read that about a year and a half later. And the rest, as they say, is history. So I was just so inspired by his writings that it led me to connect with someone from Pennsylvania who said, hey, my husband used to work at Swannanoa for Leo Russell. Would you guys like to meet us at Swannanoa, which is on Afton Mountain in Virginia? And that was the former home of the university for 50 years, from 1948 to 98, when they moved out due to a disagreement over the lease. And so that was my first visit to Swannanoa, would be 2010. And I met a lot of former students and employees who worked for the University of Science and Philosophy. And the rest, again, is history. It just began to unfold from there. And I learned that the artwork was in storage, which kind of hurt my heart. How could all this great artwork be in storage? The man was known for his artistry, his incredible ability to master the 5 fine arts with only a 4th grade education. So it sort of became an inkling in my soul to see his work get back out there. To some degree, I didn't know how it would come about, but ultimately I went on to co-produce the Secret of Light series with a former friend and co-producer. That led to Knowing the Creator 101, which I produced, and that's a 4-part series on YouTube, which is basically about illumination in general, what it is, how it works, and also couples that with elements of the Russell philosophy and science, as well as other writings from illuminated human beings that are brought up and mentioned, and it was a writing that came to me. Actually, I wrote that entire script in about 4 hours. Woke up one morning and was just thoroughly inspired. And that's what I think a lot of the general push for me was just the incredible inspiration and re-inspiration over and over again. Every time I'd open a Russell book, it would just inspire me. And that's there's a writing style in there that not many authors can capture, except the really great poets and other, mystics and writers that are affluent in that language of light, really. And so that would eventually, that series, Knowing the Creator 101, would receive the attention of Michael Hudak, the previous president of the University of Science and Philosophy. And so he contacted me in 2014 and asked if I'd like to succeed him as president. And he said he couldn't think of anybody who was more, ready for the job that he's seen do the work. So he had been looking for a while because he was ready to retire, I think, and just kind of go back into a supporting role as opposed to a leadership role. And, he's getting up to that age where he just, working, 8 to 12 hours a day to get the message and the books going out to the world and all the managerial things that come along with running a business. I think he was just ready to hand that over. And so that's where I came in 2015 as director of operations, and I assumed the presidency in 2016. And in 2017, formed the Museum and Art Committee to seek out and find a location. 2018, we moved the artwork into that location. In 2019, we had our grand opening November 1st. Soft opening was July 4th. So, and then 2020, here's COVID, and we had to close the museum. So we reopened June 10th, though, however, and we've really, what turned out, what was looking like a very dank and dark future for us, being that we just reopened, ended up being, one of our, I'd say the past 6 months has been the most record-breaking book sales that the University of Science and Philosophy has ever experienced.
Wonderful. So do you offer online courses, or is it in person, or what is?
Well, it's both. The flagship course is the home study course, and for basically a couple $100, $250 or so with shipping, you get a course that is a lifetime of study. And you can read it and reread it. The home study course is really their penultimate achievement as a man and woman seeking to create a balanced plan of lessons based on Walter's philosophy, his science, as well as Leo's input, which was invaluable to the whole course unfolding. But unlike modern college educations where you end up tens and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt just to get a master's, this is a course that you can get for, again, a few $100, and it will ultimately transform your life in ways that, the greatest comment we get from people in college who have come upon the Russell writings is this is what they hope to get in college but never did. So,
exactly.
It's really a study of the soul and the purpose of man's soul, and a proper way to commune with the divine self, which is God, in other words, or that great consciousness.
Well, what attracted me to Walter Russell, and I'm not a student of his as it speaks, I've just started looking at his work, and intuitively, inwardly, it spoke to me that it was something profound. And like you were saying, it's a way of living, and something we so desperately need in our world today. And, all my conversations with people, that's the most common thing. We get through the layers of questioning and trauma, but everybody's asking, what is the existential reality that we're living in? What is it, right? And who are we in it? And what aspect do we have? And maybe you could just jump in a little bit with Walter's philosophy, because there are many words that I read on his pages and his work and yours, that this is a living science. And it's taking us out of just the dual mind of conflict that we've been thrown into, where we think that within the human brain structure, we can figure things out. And I think it's much deeper than that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
well said. Dr. Russell, really the core of the philosophy is working knowingly with God. And you must define God in Russell science for people to understand that it's not God 1.0, but actually God 5.0, really. And the best way to view God through the Russell teachings and what they emphasize is that it is consciousness itself. And consciousness is the omnipresent field. And all motion is a 90-degree division to that white light that is back of all motion. So how can motion occur in a duality if there's not a singularity from which it unfolds? And that singularity is really everywhere at once. And that's why you can move anywhere in the realm of the earth and your consciousness is there always. It doesn't come and go. You could say one thing about sleep, for instance, that you don't really, according to the Russells, lose consciousness, you lose sensation of the body. And so I've actually slept where I've been completely conscious and I'm looking around from above myself, looking down at myself sleeping and Lori next to me. And yet I'm writing music in my mind while my body sleeps. And that's happened to me probably 100 times. And that's a lot of the music that I use for the Secret of Light series and other things came out of those inspired, more or less not dreaming moments in sleep, but fully conscious while sleeping. So it's an interesting thing to have occur. Not to say that dreams aren't as important as being awake, but that all has its purpose too. But ultimately, the philosophy, when you understand that God is consciousness, and other great mystics have alluded to this point, it's very important to understand that because it's no longer an intangible, faraway God that owes back human support, who left us, 2,000 years ago and is going to come back one day. It's something very much a part of the soul of your soul. And to the degree that you're aware of that connection to the ocean as a drop of water in it, is to the degree that you can manifest the power of that ocean within your singular drop. So in a lot of ways, it shows also that the body is a very purposeful tool designed by the creator, as all bodies are in nature, and that your soul is literally the power source within the body that drives the body around. And the Russells would also say that consciousness doesn't come from the brain, it thinks through it. So again, consciousness is a field. You have your own field of consciousness, and then you interact with other fields of consciousness. And that's why when we get around people that are angry, we can actually feel it, because there's parts of emotion that are interlinked with that consciousness as well, that it's clear to us. Sometimes it's better to get out of a place, if you've ever gone into a place and suddenly feel, oh my God, I need to get the hell out of here.
yeah, well, I think we're all
and then you leave and
but I think we're all confronting that on a very collective level right now,
right.
that we're being put up against consciousness itself. I mean, I totally agree with you, and I've had my own experiences with what I call the lucid mind, which is the seeing mind. And I think our brain and our body structure are exactly that, vehicles for that. So I don't want to bring it completely forward. I think I'll ask you more at the end how you perceive what's happening on our earth realm right now, where we are in that place. And but I find that, see, with the Walter Russell work and really accepting the mind of God, or that everything is consciousness. And people like to think that, well, we're the animate, or the trees are the animate part, but everything is conscious. And it's like, for me, the body, when it's not in an emotional reactive state, it's like an antenna. It's reaching out and touching all things. I may not be aware of it per se, but I do know that is the case. And so we're confronting right now something very, very big, I would say, an epic cycle of moving through this stage. Well, I'll just ask, do you feel that we're in this bringing forth all the darkness, all the lies, all the deceptions that we've been fed our whole lives and many, many lives. As this comes to the surface, that we're moving into another octave or another comprehension of what we are in this creation.
Yeah, I would definitely say we're at a crossroads. There's no doubt, and I've felt it coming my whole life. And really, 2020 is the penultimate, you know, tip of the spear, if you will, in terms of consciousness. Really has two directions it can go, back toward the blackness of its primal jungle, or toward the mountaintop of its becoming. You know, and what is the purpose of humanity but to manifest the Creator in all that it does? And the great artists have demonstrated this, and the poets and the scientists and the great sculptors and painters and philosophers, you know, have all strove to, you know, point man to the mountaintop. Whereas we have this really psychopathic, backward thinking, very materialist, physical, sense-based, caged sort of conscious mentality. I would call that more or less unconscious, because it has no consciousness of its own spirit. It's sort of you know, the body becomes the prison, in other words, for some minds that can't even perceive that it has a mind. So there's, in the psychopath, there's no consciousness of its own consciousness. It's not conscious of its own consciousness. So what is the solution from the mystical perspective and many idealist perspectives is that, you know, the universe is a mental process. So becoming aware of that mental process within you allows you to eventually, with hard work and effort, become conscious of your own consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at the point where you begin to steer your body as opposed to your body steering you, you know, through its senses and its gratifications to the senses. You begin to, you know, literally use your body as if you were a marionette, your mind, and your body was the puppet, and you command it, you know. And that's really the two kinds of people that are led by their bodies, you know, the adrenochrome junkies that are vested heavily in the trafficking of, you know, children and Satanism and all the whole gamut that goes with that. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum those who seek to use their bodies in a divine way to crystallize their thoughts into forms of matter that we call bodies, or man-made things, man-made items and things. And so those are the things that I think when man gets to manifesting what his desires are in a divine way with balance in his actions, you know, his bodies will become balanced if his desires are balanced first. So we just have, again, a misuse of desire, which produces what we would call otherwise psychopathy. And really, that's where I see us being right now in 2020 is there's a lot of people on this planet who would like to take us back into sort of a base animal way of being, and they have no regard for human life, who they hurt, as long as they hold on to what they've been used to for thousands of years. And they don't want man to find his pinnacle, nor do they want him to use his mind in a way that frees him from their grip. So they do everything in their power to keep things in the old world order. See, there's really not a new world order. It's an old world
Mm-hmm.
order, and it's just repackaged as a quote new world order. But, you know, it's been tried. Rome tried to create, you know, a world order back then, and it failed miserably. In fact, 29 civilizations of man have fallen at last count due to the imbalanced nature of man becoming, you know, holding and upholding the animal over his own, uh, you know, conscious evolution or unfoldment, which would have led him out of that state. So we tend to evolve and then devolve, evolve and then devolve,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of a process, but I think we're there again. And my hope is that if enough people, you know, make the right choice, then we can certainly be able to go forward. And I think that's the actual plan of the universe itself, of the
Mm-hmm.
creative consciousness that designed all life in this universe, is that it means for it to go forward. And so, you know, it's sort of like, as Walter would say, there's one law in the universe, the law of balance, and to the degree that you violate or break that law is to the degree you will be broken by it. And we're just seeing this sort of animal-based consciousness break upon the rocks, and it's at first it was sort of enjoyable to me to see it, because I've been long waiting for some form of divine justice to finally shed the light and shine light onto these darker, more nefarious aspects of humanity's, collective psyche and such. But it is a painful thing, no matter how advanced one is. It's hard to watch, but to know that there's a larger process and many smaller ones within it that are occurring purposefully for the purpose of elevating man to a higher potential is something to keep in the back of your mind, despite all the crazy wackiness taking place.
I mean, because if you're saying, as everything is from the mind of God, everything in creation, everything that's happening is consciousness. So we're having a divine opportunity right now to have these forces of darkness or evil or control, and the ones that have been manipulating the construct of our view of reality for hundreds, if not thousands of years, they actually are giving us the opportunity to seat ourselves in our own consciousness, in our own soul, and develop that what we are. I mean, in times of plenty, we tend to get lazy, or we become complacent, right? If everything's all good around us, and I've seen that through the New Age movement, through many of the things I've lived in my life. And it isn't until you hit up against a hard rock of what you're saying. If I'm not in balance, I'm so aware now that when I go out of balance, that I'm creating something that's going to come back directly to me to be rebalanced. And you get tired of those cycles after time. And so you start to fine tune yourself, right?
Right.
And so that, like, we can use, many different words, but if it's to sit in stillness, it's to sit in peace, no matter what the outer forces around us are.
Right.
Because everything out is trying to drive us back into duality, back into separation. And I think from what your experiences is, you've been able to integrate into your own being a sense of your own consciousness and your connection to source.
Right. I would say it's the aspiration to achieve vertical awareness. In other words, there's a dividing line, literally. And when you're vertically aware, you don't see duality as a prison or necessarily even a cause and effect, but a very purposeful thing. Duality is wonderful because it informs you. How would you know you were out of balance unless there is a duality to, an injury, for instance, is a very present way to know that you did something out of balance. And I'll just say this, the more you become aware of the law of balance and your own relationship to it, the less time it takes to learn lessons. I mean, a lot of these people, a lot of friends and other researchers will say, how can these people commit evil for so many years and live to be so old? Well, it's sort of like, if once you become aware of balance within you, the lessons come very quickly. And I think, for a lot of people, the lessons will come later, but they will come nonetheless. So when you're finding yourself more on the path of conscious unfoldment, then you're going to notice that any unbalances will come back to you very quickly. And that's a good sign, because it says that you're no longer, ignorant of the law of balance. And really, it is something that is to be taken to heart, because, no one I know can actually say that who I respect as a person who's developed their character will try to write off the fact that, they've been their own worst enemy in their life, that they have always been the one to stand in the way of their own development. It's sort of when you point the finger, there's three pointing back at you. And those who see the world as a very external place, a very materialistic worldview, often try to replace spirit with matter. And the more they accumulate, the less spirit they actually have or recognize. So again, when you turn inward and think inwardly toward the soul and listen inwardly with your spiritual ears and look inwardly with your spiritual eyes, then a whole world opens up. And I think that's sort of going vertical, leaving the sense-based seesaw and standing your consciousness up to where you control the seesaw. It does not any longer control you. And that's what I think genius is. That's what great artists are able to do. They work from that zone. People in sports that achieve miraculous scores and make incredible moves are also in that zone. Martial artists, they talk about the zone, the being centered and being aware of, you know, your body as a tool, not as a something that leads you around or leads the mind around, you know, for its lusts and other deadly sins, you could say. But those are basically all just imbalances that lead you again away from your own soul. So again, there's two kinds of people, really: those who drive themselves and those who are driven by others. And I think we're all looking to get out of that. As a collective, you could say a lot of people don't want to be, you know, told or dictated to or tyrannized. You know, we've been through this over and over and over and over. And I think there's a resounding populist movement taking place, which is again centering around freedom and liberty, those basic rights of human beings, to have those rights and practice them and be free of tyranny. And the biggest tyranny we're seeing now is in health tyranny. And it's obviously the avenue that the old world order wants to use to bash us over the head with the club of fear, drive us all away from the principles of freedom and liberty, back into our cages where we grovel at their feet for the next advice or the next press conference, you know. And you know, it's obvious to me there's a very polarized movement in, and I don't think it's man-made. A lot of people will say, oh, well, that side's they're both controlled by the same. I don't think that's the case, because in this case, you know, what's being popularized is the idea of freedom. It's to not be enslaved to a bureaucracy and the likes of Bill Gates and others who want to just, you know, forcibly take control of the human destiny. And so this is a very big worldwide pushback. And I think nature caused this division, because these people, these dark nefarious powers, they pushed a pendulum. Okay, they pushed it as far as they could push it, and now it's swinging back, and they have no control over it.
Exactly.
And that's what created the populist movement, was a natural reaction. Nature holds the right to all reactions, not man, as Walter Russell would say. So
say that again.
So nature, not man, holds the right to all reactions.
Right.
And so nature's reaction to this 6,000-year-long attempt to build a system of world control over man himself is failing, because it's not in tune with universal law. And again, to the degree that one violates universal laws, to the degree one is broken by it, and we're seeing it break. So that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I mean, that's there's a dichotomy in it, because like you expressed already, we know the destruction that has to take place, because it has to, because the system is a lie. And just a simple truth is, truth will always stand, a lie will always fall. And so that we've based a construct of our society, and you say 6,000 years that this has been done, it can't maintain itself any longer. And as our consciousness comes online, as it were, as we start to enter into the universal one or the universal field, the very act of that consciousness is changing things. And I like to say that to people, because so many are still so being pulled by the extremes, right? The right, the left, you know, who's going to save us, who's not going to save us. You know, that person says that one says that. Again, going back to Walter Russell, what I loved about his work, and as I've intuitively noted, this is free of dogma. It's, you know, so you can go through all the old esoteric tests, you can study all sorts of scripture and many, many things, but to actually be centered in the center of your own being and allowing that to be the spirit within, to be the driving force of your life. And that takes a lot of work, because everything is out there trying to pull you off that center, pull you off that course. But yeah, go ahead. So my voice is just the way I use it to those that I talk to is like, listen to the inner voice, but you have to silence the outer to hear that voice.
Mhm.
And many people, I mean, they know it. I know they know it. I know they've had epiphanies. I know they've had experiences, but they haven't been able to, you said build character, and maybe that's the right word, to build their character around that vertical axis.
Mhm. Well, there's every tripwire, every
Yeah, exactly.
used
And
car
they're going
salesman is ready to sell you a cure for what ails your inability to look within you.
to,
Here's another drug, here's another prescription medication.
the newest diet, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. If it's not your back, it's your knee or your hip, or and then next thing you know, it's you know, it's everything external. This whole world is built to pull our attention away from the inward and toward the outward. Walter Russell himself said it. Inspiration is so fleeting, and uh, it's the greatest gift given to us by God. And what do we do when we get it? In his time, he said men would go buy tickets to Coney Island instead of following their inspiration. Let's go be amused by the bells and the buzzers and the whistles and the joy rides and it's just, but yet, so few are able to follow that inspiration. And the more they follow it, because an inspiration is a divine illumination, it's just a minor one. And so anybody that's ever been inspired has had an illumination. It's again, it's just a scale of small to big. Now, not everybody that has an illumination ends up like Walter Russell, where 39 days go by and
yeah.
you're drawing hundreds of charts and graphs that become a new science to be presented, and or to become the message of the divine Iliad, 40,000 words of just pure poetry, unlike anything ever written. Even it outwit, as Walter said, somebody said of his writings, they outwit Walt Whitman. So I
No,
mean,
I mean,
that's a hell of a compliment, considering Whitman's one
that's
of the greatest poets ever to live. And but yeah, the
so.
message of the divine Iliad was his gift to humanity that
Mhm.
came from that super inspired illumination period. So it's really and just to say one further point on you're making the point of always looking to the external, that people never realize that bodies are there for consciousness to drive them around purposefully. We get drug around by, again, just everything outside of us. Even in all of material science, you even have God as an externality because they're
Mhm.
looking for him as a particle,
Mhm. Mhm.
which again, just it's the inverse, where we actually really are in a stage where truth has been inverted,
So
and
what
it's
it has, because I have a lot of Christian friends, Buddhist friends. I have a lot of people, but within well, I know Walter writes about the body of Christ and what that I am light. I am the light. What, in your experience, keeps people locked out of their own divinity? That they have to externalize God or goddess or whatever outside of themselves.
because all our lives we're taught that God is out there, out somewhere else, external from us. All our lives we have a middleman. When we go to church as children, he's standing there as the go-between us and the creator. All our lives we have a teacher telling us that either God doesn't exist in terms of atheistic communism in the schools and the teaching
Mm-hmm.
modalities. The teacher's the authority, not your own mind. We're taught to, you know, like somebody mentioned recently, a speaker who spoke at the Russell Museum said, you know, where did we agree that it was okay to sit children in a chair for 7 hours and just teach them by rote to memorize?
It's done by on
Whoever thought of
purpose.
that,
They
right? I
did.
mean,
The same, very same controllers who instituted it very purposefully.
yeah, the first time I was put in kindergarten, I left every day for 2 weeks. I would sneak out, climb out a window, or my mom got so tired of taking me back up to school, but ultimately I ended up getting spanked, I think, and that was the fear of punishment made me stay at that point. But anyways, we've always had a middleman, really, and very few have come, you know, across to the human race and given the message that God is within us, and what is God from a psychological standpoint? God is consciousness, and that makes perfect sense. And so here's the crux of the matter, though, is that God, true consciousness, must allow for free will. And that's what creates evil. Free will is the cause of evil, not demons and devils. And only the great philosopher Walter Russell have I ever read that he put the blame squarely on man, as opposed to interdimensional beings or entities from places that you can't exact justice. You can't arrest a demon or put it on trial in a court of law. It's just a free evil entity that goes around causing havoc everywhere. That's an irresponsible way to view one's own consciousness, because it also conveniently allows an out. If everybody could just claim, oh, I killed that guy because I had a demon in me, then every murderer would be walking the streets free. So there's no accountability and no responsibility. I like the way the Russells pointed the finger at man and said he's the cause, the root cause of his own evil, because he misuses his own free will, and that's what causes it. 2,000 years ago, we needed the demons and devils because we couldn't really understand psychology, and we were afraid to point the finger at man himself. So there was always an out for why everything bad in the world happened.
Well, you answered my own question, because when I asked it, the one thing that I see people that are like knocking at the threshold, they are at the threshold. There's many, many right now sitting at the threshold of their own being, but it's a responsibility. And I think they're, maybe they've torn apart all the construct of the matrix. They see through the lies, they see the indoctrinations and all of that. But to step into that is responsibility. Because then you do have to come to yourself and say, I am responsible for every thought, every feeling, every action, all of that I'm responsible for. And so, that's certainly been for me what keeps me in balance. And if I don't have anything to say, or I'm not being directed for the best of my ability from the spirit within, I sit and wait. And that is, in our driven world of do, we have also been taken away from the ability to sit with ourselves.
Right.
We scare ourselves, frankly.
Yeah, you nailed it. Spirituality is an act of responsibility. Everybody in the New Age movement is akin to a fast food spiritual drive-through. It's fast spirituality. Oh, for $400, I can watch Deepak Chopra talk for an hour, and that'll get me where I need to go. Or, Eckhart Tolle, just listen to him and Oprah, or let's go to a TED talk, and suddenly you've discovered your inner spirit and your greatest desires that have been hidden from you all your life. No, it doesn't work like that, and a lot of people don't want to do the work. It's called the great work for a reason, because it is. And as Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. Michael Sarian talks about it as seemingly going an inward journey that makes everybody else look at him as if he's a fool, right? And what are you doing? What do you mean you're going out in the woods for a weekend because you want to be alone? Where's the fun in that? Don't you want to, drink and build a humongous campfire and guzzle down, beers and whiskey and laugh and make noise? And, the one who goes inward must also go alone. And that's what scares the hell out of people, I think, more than anything. True spirituality is a very solo journey, and what do they do in churches but worship in groups? What do they do in New Age circles but worship in groups? What does the guru have as he's over his flock? What does he have? A group of people on their yoga mats, right? Where's the soloist? The soloist isn't broadcasting on YouTube that he's out in the woods being solo. That's not.
Oh, I know one. I do know one guy doing that. He's wonderful. He's up in Norway somewhere, but I love him.
Leading someone in a spiritual meditation, that's, for each in their own, but ultimately you want the real experience. Turn off the phone, turn off the electronics, and march your ass out into the woods. Sit on a stump for about an hour and just listen to everything. Let your spirit become the nature that's around you.
Mhm.
And I
And be
think
willing
that's,
to sit through your discomfort, because when
yeah.
you do that, you become uncomfortable. Because you're not getting the affirmation from the construct of who you are any longer. So you
Mhm.
are really alone with God, creation.
Right.
And but yeah, but that's like, okay, no, that will bring me to ask you another question, is because the great realm of the subconscious, right? What we're not conscious of, the great deep, right? That is actually manifesting through us also, because we don't have a consciousness of ourself within that. So like the shadow part, what does Walter Russell talk about our own shadow? Like, because that'll come up. When you sit with yourself, it will come up. And
Right.
how do we deal with that, the discomfort, maybe the tears, the past life traumas, all of the things that are in our consciousness, and they're actually in our bodies. I mean, our body has a cellular memory of many,
Mhm.
many things. And we are living through, we're going into a deeper time where there are going to be traumas out there in the world.
Mhm.
And many of us come from trauma.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know a person on this planet who hasn't experienced a traumatic event in their life. And in a sense, that puts us all together in sort of a, we have that camaraderie with anybody we meet. We can know that they too, even if they're somebody that's healed through it, which, you know, even Russell himself, he grew up in a time before psychology was very well known.
Mm-hmm.
So when people dealt with problems, they didn't deal really through psychological methods of the day, because there really weren't any. You know, they didn't start to develop and evolve until the 40s, 50s, and
Mm-hmm.
60s, I'd say. And then ultimately he had his own traumas as well. So, but he really didn't speak in a psychological terminology, use things like shadow or unconscious. To him, everything was consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, he did mention in a writing somewhere, him and Leo had talked about there being no such thing as unconsciousness, that basically there's consciousness, but then it's basically the unawareness, but there's
Of
still
that.
consciousness underneath every process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily an unconscious or anti-conscious. It's just a lack of awareness that
Of that
this thing
consciousness.
exists.
Mm-hmm.
And as they said too, all knowledge exists. It can be ours for the asking. And all knowledge is there. Man has only to reach out for it and acquire it. So that's how he, through divine illumination, was able to draw hundreds of charts and drawings, to know about the chemical bonds and elements, to be the first human being on planet Earth to talk about the elements as being sexed, male and female. Nobody had ever talked about that before, to my knowledge. And also to draw and thoroughly know the wave of creation, which has life-giving and death-giving paths to it. And that is really, I mean, proof in the pudding there that he acquired no interest in science whatsoever, but yet he's given the keys to understand the atom, to understand uh, chemistry and
Mm-hmm.
biology beyond anything his contemporaries of the day even told him. Your chemistry charts, I'm a master chemist and I don't even know what the hell this means. Can you
Mm-hmm.
explain it to me? So he said, I'm working on that. I'm going to release a book, as I was ordered to in this experience. 7 years from his actual experience in 1921, he would go on to release the Universal One. And that was given to 300 universities and 700 scientists. 1,000 copies were made. He did not reprint the book because he was informed by the Catholic Church that the Pope was going to issue a decree against him and his book should he try to reprint it. So the Catholic Church shut it down.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when you really come back to the crux of the matter between consciousness and what is unconscious, really we're, through a man of such an experience, that he gained knowledge of chemistry and the atom and the wave because of his divine illumination. He did not study this stuff in a university
Mm-hmm.
or a school or library. He pulled it out from within himself. And that's why he realized that everything truly is consciousness. It's just in degrees of whether you're aware of it or not. So somebody who's
Right.
not aware of their own soul is capable of some of the most destructive acts the world's ever known when it comes to a human. Whereas those who are aware of their own divinity have more awareness of their own consciousness. So you're really, it's, think of it in terms of light versus dark. The more you light up a room, the less dark there will be in that room.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean there's no light in that room, even though there's a very small one, or there's just only dark, or only, because light and dark are the same thing. When you invert them, they become the other. So it's an interesting notion. But yeah, again, when you bring psychology into the situation, and the advent of psychology and its blossoming in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and up to today, I mean, you start to see these terms appear, like shadow and unconscious and
Mm-hmm. Well, a
subconscious.
lot of the work of Carl Jung, I
Mhm.
mean, right, who brought that all into
Incredible.
this incredible work.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, we're still faced with, and basically of taking universal consciousness or universal concepts and trying to put them in a language that can be passed verbally, writing, whatever.
Sure.
But behind that, the unseen aspect of it, and maybe the next question I'd ask you is vibration or resonance. And that is, for me, anyways, an integral part of knowing myself, is to be enough in touch with where I'm resonating from. Am I resonating from a place of peace, love? And I don't like to use those words because they a lot of times they lose the depth of their meaning, but it's the inner part of, and I know Russell's work is a lot about that too, is vibration is within that realm. And so and electromagnetisms, maybe you want to just maybe touch on that, like the electromagnetic force or the perturbation. I mean, you can look at it that we live in a great field of consciousness, or ether, plasma physics brings all this stuff up, and that we within that, like that drop of water, we're making a wave or a perturbation in that field, and it goes everywhere simultaneously. So when you become more conscious of that, you're definitely more aware of what you want to put out into this creation.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was one of the earliest purporters of an electric universe, and he said there's one force in the universe, and that's electricity. It does a seeming two things: charges and discharges. We falsely name the discharge a magnetic field. It's actually an electrical field. You don't need a force called magnetism to explain the universe when you understand that one force does both. So really, it's like saying I need a separate body to exhale. So there should be two me's, because one inhales, but there's one sitting next to me over here that exhales. We don't disassociate function by creating separate bodies to explain our own processes, which really all things are, even a minute cell in a rock, mineral or whatnot. A cell of matter is also the universe. So as above, so below, as within, so without. The great Hermetic axiom, really does explain there's got to be one law for all things. And
Exactly.
I think that's what he was able to do. His cosmology was a very seamless cosmology. It wasn't splintered, did not require a different set of laws to explain the motions of stars and planets versus the motions of animals, plants, minerals, or humans. We're all bound to one very exacting law, and that's the law of balance. And if you need two words, he said, rhythmic balanced. And if you need three, let those three words be rhythmic balanced interchange. And that's exactly what we do. If you just take our breath cycle, we breathe in through two nostrils, right? Which are the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, or the north and south. We have an equator in the middle. So we breathe in cold air, we exhale heat at the equator. Same with the planet, same with the moon, same with the sun. The poles of the planet charge inwardly. What can't integrate is ejected outward at the equator. And that's why all equators are warm. Your warmest point of your body is the center of your body. you know, and we also have two halves, hemispheres of a brain. We have a left and right hand that equally match in perfect mirrored form. I mean, that's divine symmetry right there. And so when you realize too that your resonance, your resonant field is literally created from a mental standpoint. You know, you can make yourself very angry. I've heard of friends who have gotten strokes. I have friends who've given themselves strokes because they got angry. You know, when they're trying to fix something, the tool slips, they cut their hand, they start screaming and yelling. Next thing you know, they have a stroke. So that resonation of anger, you know, can be detrimental to a body. So Russell was always of the mind that you should try to, you know, not assuage emotion when you should feel it. You know, as Leo would say, when someone passes away, you shouldn't, you know, you should feel those emotions of loss and you know, bodies miss bodies, right? So it's not something to assuage, but natural consequences of losing a loved one or feeling angry when there's a time. But I have met people who like to be angry, and that usually doesn't end very well, right? So
No, well, you know,
ultimately, resonation is a mental process. It stems from mental causes, I would say. And like I said, when you walk into a bar or something and you suddenly turn around and walk out the other way because you can feel there's something about to go down in there, you know, you're feeling a resonant frequency, be it anger, you know, concern, you know, worry. These are all emotions, and emotions are in motion, so they create waves, and those waves are perturbations that, you know, resonate frequencies. So much like sickness, Royal Raymond Rife, you resonate a certain frequency at cancer cells and they will destroy themselves.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of great work that can come out of that.
right. And when you talk about electricity, we have positive, negative charge, right? Or
Well, ultimately, the Russells would go on to discount and debunk the idea of negative electricity. There's two positive electricities, male and female. It's like saying one of your lungs is negative and the other's positive, but they both inhale, which the implosion, the inhalation, is the positive motion. And when you negate the motion, or when you negate the inwinding by unwinding through an exhalation, that would be a negation, but it's not a negative particle pulling your breath out of your lungs.
no, not particle, but yeah,
Right.
but said
Or
everything.
force. It's not even a force. It's, again, charge and discharge. You're charging your
Right.
lungs. It takes no effort to exhale. In fact, what's the last thing a person does at death? They exhale,
Yeah.
because that's the final act of the body, exhalation. So, you know, the only force required is the inhalation or the implosion, which creates matter and solidifies it and puts it into its spherical form as space surrounds it and holds it together. All matter seeks to explode. So there's no negative force causing falsely labeled at a force, which has only confused us even more. But that all stems from, I think, the Big Bang, which is an exhalation only theory, that the universe is only exhale. And does your body only exhale? Of course not. If it did, you wouldn't have lived past your first breath. So it's ludicrous to assign a death sentence to the universe when everywhere we look, from the mineral to the plant to the animal to the fish to the birds to the human kingdoms, we see inhalation, we see implosion everywhere. But we simply have this wrong-headed idea based on our senses, again, looking outwardly, feeling, touching, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling. Those are the facts to science. There's no mind, no room for mind in the current scientific paradigm. So we shut basically the whole mental process of inhalation out of nature and have tried to explain it using an exhalation only model. And that's why, you know, when when nature lifts her redwoods up into the air, 300 feet into the air, she generates coolness. When man lifts a space shuttle up, there's toxic fumes and clouds all over the place that would kill birds and you if you stood in the middle of it and breathed it. So ultimately, we've only got it half right. And I think once mankind begins to discover the process of implosion,
Explosion.
which is really cold electricity,
Hmm.
that's another word for it.
Cold
And he can,
fusion.
yeah, he can create cold electricity
Hmm.
very much in the way that nature does. And you don't have to blow things up in order to acquire
Yeah.
power.
Yeah. And it is true in so Nikola Tesla knew Walter Russell, they knew each other.
Yeah, I believe they did. I believe they had a few visits, though I have no
Hmm.
proof of that. But they
Okay,
did.
because
There are a few letters of correspondence. We'd like to get in touch with someone from one of the Nikola Tesla museums or research centers that has letters and things like that, and actually find out if there are any letters to Nikola from Walter Russell or vice versa. That'd be something really great to discover. But
there's a quote out there that's quoted often that Nikola told Walter to bury his work for 1,000 years because
mhm,
mankind wasn't ready for it. Is that
right.
verified?
That's paraphrased. It's verified that Walter told that to Leo, and
Okay.
Leo wrote it down in the opening of the reprint of the Universal One back in
Okay.
1974. Nikola supposedly told him, and I don't see any reason why we couldn't take Walter's word for it. I mean,
Hmm.
he was, he was a mystic, but he wasn't somebody who lied for attention. He didn't have to. He was a master of everything he
No.
did.
Right.
His work spoke for himself. That the demonstration that his message works over others is that he had 40 tons of art and sculpture as proof, and that was just 2% of his work. The rest is out in the world. So he often wanted, to get his message out to the world, but his proof in the pudding was the work that he had done in his life.
Hmm. Isn't that
And
the truth
so,
for all of us? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
when one looks at oneself and in the
Mhm.
creative aspect of your own life, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at your work.
Right.
And it seems like you've also taken on quite a large body of work yourself, Matt.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've got a lot more to do. um, the biggest thing I ever did was actually setting up all of Walter's art
Uh-huh.
because, I'm the only person who set this museum up that has yet to take a tour of it. I was
Really?
just too busy putting things on walls, and, I had a vision for how it should go and how the flow should be. And a lot of, just hard work went into it. So I've never really got to enjoy that work yet.
Hmm.
I'm going to actually go do a tour eventually, but yeah, when you're getting things done, there's no time to stop and admire it, and I think that for me is just staying busy has always been one of my greater virtues. I think being a busybody, because then you're getting things done. This year, though, however, I must say I have actually stepped back into more of a relaxed position. I
Hmm.
think I was spent 8 months in Virginia last year getting this museum up and running, and that was just constant action. I was working 20 hours a day,
Hmm.
so over 100 hours a week, several weeks in a row. And I think this year I've just sort of needed a bit, if you will. But all that goes into the next charge, which is going to be more video production. I plan to do a lot more in that area as well, and more music production, things like that. So
Wonderful. So I don't want to go too long on this. I think you and I, when we talked the first time, we could probably take this conversation in a lot of different directions. I just want to get this out to the people that I know who you are. I mentioned your name, I mentioned Walter Russell, and I realized that with so much information flowing out there, for me, I didn't even want to speak any longer because unless I could bring something very real to the field, very life-giving, life-promoting, uplifting. And I think a lot of us know right now that that is part of why we're here, is that we're to lift the consciousness, we're to lift the field. And we're all going to do it in our very own unique ways. So if there is something, because I love your writing, Matt, I really do.
thank you.
And it's there's a lot of words out there, there's a lot of ideas, but to me it's eloquence. It's being able to take something and put it into a language that actually reaches past even the mind. It reaches down into the spirit of the being so that you support others. I know from what you write, and I've seen your posts and things, what's the most vital aspect of our humanness within this divine structure that we can use to navigate what we're going through at this moment?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, virtues in and of themselves are morals. So when you're a moral person, you're a lot less likely to suffer from phantoms of your own mind. You know, things that aren't true to nature, you won't find a lot of the range of human emotions in nature. Nature is what the Russells would call God control. Instinct is God control. And that's why nature doesn't rise and fall like man's civilizations. It's got absolute continuity. Yeah, volcanoes happen, earthquakes happen, but life goes on. It's not completely ended and shattered, and it doesn't take 500 years to build it back up. A clear sign that we're ending an era or an epoch on planet Earth is the fact that you're seeing civilizations sort of go through a deterioration process. And I think the very important thing to remember is that knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge and the right use of knowledge is what is going to save mankind. And that's why it's a living philosophy. It's a living love of wisdom, which means you apply that love for life in everything you do, in every act you have in your daily occurrences. If you apply love to it, which is really an empathic, purposeful engagement in each action. If I scrub a toilet, I'm going to put 110% into it, you know, and you will not find any dust swept under any rugs in my house. Everything is, you know, everything's done to the absolute max, to the thorough, to the best of my ability. Include if I drink with friends, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. If I converse, I'm going to try to do that to the best of my ability. And if I want to draw or write, I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. And I think that's what people might see in some of my inspired writings. I always, and I don't leave darkness as an end all be all. You know, yeah, we are going through a tough time in the human world, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Every storm always follows with calm, being what comes after. So no matter how high the waves get or how raging the seas and the winds and the storm and the rain, you know, there's always the sun, there's always the calm after the storm. And, you know, this is as it should be, and everything is as it should be. And this too will pass. Two of my favorite sayings, and there's no better teacher to convince anybody of that than nature. Nature is the great continuity. It's never ending, and it's absolutely beautiful in its balance and its displays. When things get too rough, listen to the birds. Listen to the song of the birds. Stop what you're thinking and go outside. Anywhere you live in the some sort of bird song or another, you know, you can always step outside, listen to the wind, listen to nature, return to zero, if you will, and stop the seesaw, go vertical. You know, that's really, I'd say, the saving grace of every human being has the ability to become neutral, just to be without thinking. And just the way to do that works best for me is just to let the song of the birds in, you know, let the sound of nature into your soul and let it reverberate until that, as you said earlier, that vibration becomes your vibration, if you will. And so zeroing your thought, you know, is a great exercise. And in times like this, we're in a permanent political climate, but it won't always be permanent. But this is how it's supposed to be right now, because it's very important that we pay attention to processes too. This process if we pay attention to it, if we make the right decisions as individuals, which on a larger scale is a collective, then we'll be able to secure the illusion of freedom for another few hundred years, but times like these demand tough characters, and men and women have to be who they are truly being called to be. If we continue to let this ritual mask our children, mask us, then, once the blanket of communism falls over a people, they don't get that blanket off of them.
No.
At least there's no experience in my life that I've ever seen a communist nation that, became communist throw the blanket of communism off of itself.
Right.
It hasn't happened yet.
And then
So
we
I
have
think
the definite added problem or danger that we're confronting with the technocrats and the technocratic
Exactly.
controlling of all of us. And I mean, that's the hard part for when I speak with folks that haven't really woken up to the bigger agenda, is that they have and I don't blame them. It's a scary, scary thought to realize that under the communistic thing, that behind that is driving it is the technocracy and the and the eugenics, and the thing, whatever that consciousness is and how it manifests, that wants to take control over this realm down to the very last grain of sand. And I do see that as our greatest danger. And you're right. If we go into this communistic, socialistic reality, it's going to be extremely painful. Right. And I do not know. I mean, there will be pockets that will survive, but many won't. Right.
Well, again, I think the spirit of the human species is much greater, thus the populist movement, which is a very organic, natural polarity. It's basically biology versus machines. And I could go into multiple dichotomies or dualities to further that. It's control versus freedom. It's medical tyranny versus healthy liberty. The freedom to choose. It's being masked versus being unmasked. You can mask. You cannot mask the truth because the truth is eternal. It's maskless.
Exactly.
The lie is the mask. The lie is what you try to cover the truth with, but the lie is not the truth. It's the mask itself. So what the mask represents in so many ways is human obedience and submission to a presumed authority that is not divine. It's not godly. I only submit to one, and that is the Creator. That is the consciousness that my drop in that ocean is. And there's no greater force in the world. And I'm already consigned to be part of that. So I have no fear.
Right.
And if it needs to go down with a physical stand, then so be it. I'm prepared for that. And so are many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide are also prepared for that. They would rather live dangerously with freedom than in security through total tyranny and submission.
Right.
And that's where we're at.
Is there really any choice when you put it like that? I mean, conscious choice. When you put it like that, there is no choice. And that's why people say, well, where's your line in the sand? Well, for me, it was drawn a long time ago, right? And it is the way of freedom. So like, I'm not torn by anything. I mean, of where I stand. I'm just not.
Right. I read Transformation America back in 2003, Kathy O'Brien, and talked about satanic pedophile rings. So I've known since then, and seeing that this is coming out now gives me great hope, because a lot of people would never have heard of this otherwise. I've been calling the media fake since 2001. And maybe even before, but it's been a hope that I would eventually see others come to see the media as the most, as the movie Network with Ned Beatty and talked about the media is the most goddamn powerful force on the planet.
It is.
And ultimately that power is waning. There's no one, CNN can't go anywhere now without thousands of people chanting CNN sucks and you're fake news. And I've been saying that, like I said, for 20 some years, and it takes an orange guy to come along, and I get calls from friends and family that go, hey, the media's fake. I'm like, well, where were you when I was saying that 15 years ago? I've been saying that for 20 years, and now suddenly the orange guy comes along and you're telling me the
Right.
media's fake. It's like, I've known that, you know. So at least the view I have is whatever it takes for people to come to, again, a higher awareness, to become conscious of themselves and their, you know, their divinity, which freedom is a divine principle. Liberty is a divine principle. Liberty is the exercise. That's what freedom, that's how freedom exercises. It takes liberties, right? And gives liberty to people. So the correct application of freedom is a healthy liberty. And you can't have one without the other, because, you know.
And you can't have that without the really deep do no harm, right? Because my liberty isn't because I take something from you so that I can have my freedom. It's a consciousness of that. No, we're far from that, because many, many times, even unconsciously, there's still things that could be perceived, let's say, as harmful to another. That's a whole nother layer I won't go into right now. Yeah. But if you have that, and love, you said love, Matt, maybe that's where we should end our talk today, because underlying everything is this frequency, or this love, and it's compassion, and it's a connectedness. It's for me anyways, it's this connecting force. And so, you know, many, I just want to, it's like this, because I have my own metaphors and my own, you know, visual self, you know, just like taking this love and re-enfolding this humanity, this creation back into that field. And frankly, most of the problems I see with other people are that it comes from lack of self-love, which comes from lack of knowing their divine nature. And so if there's any message, that's what I try to keep my uprightness, my tact on for whoever I come in contact with.
And the Russells would go on to say too, God is love. I mean, and love is power, love is light, love is truth, love is stillness, silence, equilibrium. So all these things are God, which is consciousness. That's what true consciousness is. And coming to that is our saving grace. And again, the Russells destroyed the idea of the need for a middleman. There's nobody who can stand between you and that realization but you. And the more you go out to find it outside of yourself, the more chance you can end up in a psychopathic situation.
You're going to get snared. And guarantee it. You're going to get snared.
To the degree one is not aware of that authority within, is to the degree they will try to replace that authority without. And that's why the need for people like the Gateses and the Faucis exists at all. That's where the idea of bureaucracy comes from. It's man's inability to govern himself. So we must get an external authority to govern us. That's what the path of saving grace is going to be. It's going to be coming to consciousness. And as Michael Tsarian would say, don't leave it at the door. You know, embrace it, discover it, search for it, seek it out. And you will find what you seek for. You know, there's no doubt.
And if fear presents itself, take one more step through it. It's only one step away. I mean, that's the thing, is that sometimes people are so frozen by their fears of, what do I do without authority? Who am I without authority? Well, it's a step-by-step process. Just walk through it. You know, show to yourself and to the divine that you actually are part of it. And you said it to me when we talked, and maybe this is the highest note, is guaranteed under natural law, it will give back to you that which is. It'll become the affirming force of your life, and you won't need it from authority, and you won't need it from family and associates and all the things that, and once that happens often enough, that then becomes the pattern of your existence.
And if we should find ourselves that we're in the situation where, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita wrote about this war that occurred, know that God will fight on your side if it's for the right reasons, not self-righteous, but for the righteous reasons that are afforded to all sentient beings.
Mhm.
There's not an animal or insect in the entire mineral, vegetable, or animal kingdom that does not have some form of a defensive mechanism built
Mhm.
in. And I think that's really the only thing that's kept communism at bay from taking over the United States, is that little annoying thing called the Second Amendment. But do know this: if some things are worth fighting for, and if it comes to that, then we have to do what we have to do. But ultimately, I think a strong presentation of conscious people who want to, take humanity to a higher level, that is the base of what is needed.
Mhm.
We have to, open a hole and go a little bit Lord of the Rings in the third act, where we're at the black
Exactly.
gates of Mordor
I was
and the
just thinking
trolls are
that.
coming and the orcs are coming. Then get ready.
Right.
Let's
Yeah.
do what we have to do.
Yep.
I guarantee you, when God fights on your side, which is consciousness, it's going to make every needed step. It's
Mhm.
going to open the holes and expose the weaknesses of the enemy, which are all built on lies, built on fears. And I think the battle is going to go much more quickly and in our favor than most people realize, because where God is, consciousness is. And as Joan of
Mhm.
Arc would say, act and God will act.
Mhm. Yeah. So blessings, Matt. Thank you for joining with me today and
It's a
sharing
pleasure,
this
Christine.
journey. And I will definitely get this out, and I will put links to all of the Walter Russell material, to your website. And I would love to have maybe sometime after election, when we see where this goes,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
have a regrouping. And, I lived
sure.
in Mexico since I was in my 20s. So, I don't have I mean, you're talking about something beyond patriotic fervor, that a lot of
Mhm.
people are very patriotic, um, but it is our love of freedom. And our love of
Mhm.
freedom is eternal vigilance. And we have to be prepared. I agree with you full heartedly to do whatever is
Yeah.
necessary.
And that starts in the soul of each individual. And
Right.
then it extends from there. You have a right to defend your family, but
Mm-hmm.
most of all, you have a right to defend yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where this whole idea starts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always something. Nature is an incredible thing. If we didn't kill nature, it would grow over the tops of our houses and just
Mm-hmm.
completely erase all civilization. So in a sense, we have to take life but you can do that in a divine way as much as you can
Right.
respect life. So with one hand I take it, with one hand I give it.
Right.
But
Which all
again,
the ancient warriors knew this. I mean,
yeah,
the ancient
right.
people knew that the ancient battles was whatever life you took, you knew there was the other side of it, which is
Mhm.
actually the honoring of that life.
Right,
It was never
right,
separate in our consciousness. We've just happened to be in a place now where killing is done for sport and killing is done for
right.
control. And, that's how out of balance it is,
Hmm.
so, and it's also, uh, a lot of the people that are light warriors or the new age thought, they can't comprehend that sometimes it is necessary, right? I
Hmm.
mean, but how we do it, I mean, I learned that from my Native American brothers and sisters. It was, if you took a life for your food, you offer it back, you give thanks and you offer back to that life. So you're now in a symbiotic relationship with
Yeah,
that, and it's not out of
yeah.
balance. And oh, blessings to you, Matt, and for all you do.
That
And
makes all the
it's,
difference.
it does.
Mhm.
It does. Just as me sitting down, I
Yeah,
was thinking
yeah,
before you came on, I thought I just want to do justice, because I feel like this is a sacred conversation, and we're talking about a sacred man named Walter Russell and his wife, Lau. And
yep.
I just want to, thank you for putting that out there. And I've got the universal one. Of course, now I want the divine alien. So
There you go.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know,
And anyone's interested, they can visit philosophy.org/store. You'll find all the books there. Your purchase helps support the preservation of the Russell legacy. We really greatly appreciate any support you can offer. Donations can be made at philosophy.org/fundraiser. And it all goes to benefit and preserve the Russell legacy. There's so much more to do. I could literally have a team of 100 people and we'd stay busy for 10 years with all that needs to be done, backing up the archives digitally, the scientific research taking place. There's just a lot of tremendous and good things happening, despite this
Mm-hmm.
world. And you can also do that in your own life. Make make as much good as you can, because, you know, that helps offset. And I think being creative and staying focused, and again, unfolding those inner talents, looking inward and listening inward to the soul, more so than this chatter and noise of the outer world, will help lead you to your own mountaintop. And the more people that join the mountaintop, that's where the very actual poetic meaning of brotherhood and sisterhood comes from, that the poets and the real mystics talked about a brotherhood and sisterhood. It isn't made of people that were forced to be equal to go there. It's made by people who did the inner work, became great characters, and joined this brotherhood that creates a kind of planet where we would not need military or police. I mean, but until that work is done, it's just a far aloof dream. But nonetheless, it can be achieved where hearts are true and minds are focused. So thank you very much, Christine.
Thank you. And I do believe that that world is in the process of being created. Maybe we don't see it yet, but it's there. It has to be there, right? In the field of all consciousness, it has to be there, right? So do your inner work, folks. And thank you, Matt. And we'll talk again maybe soon.
Yep.
Huh? And yeah, it's going to be
good.
a good day coming up, a day of change. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. God bless.
God bless you.